The XFL, this is according to SportMediaWatch.com. The 4 XFL games over the past weekend dropped in viewership had at least 50% drop from these same windows back in 2020. So the relaunch of the XFL post-COVID, right after the NFL season, not too many people tuned in to check things out. I mean, I dabbled, kind of, stuck my toe in the water a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't know if this is a sign of people being footballed out, but the XFL, not a great look to open up the weekend. And you would assume that it's only downhill from here for the XFL moving forward.
Is that what it could be to you guys? Could it be the fact that maybe we're getting to the point where we've got enough football? We don't need another league that's not with this type caliber of player that we have in the NFL.
It just ended. Part of the reason they moved the Pro Bowl is Roger Goodell said, no, we wanted our season to end with the Super Bowl. We didn't want our season to end with an exhibition. That was his logic back in the day when he moved the Pro Bowl to the week before the Super Bowl. The season just ended. I don't know about you guys. I love the NFL. I love football. But it was cool to get a little bit of a break to where you weren't having to watch 15, 16 games. Not that it's a punishment or it's, a real job or anything like that. But it was cool. Okay, now we get a little bit of a break. We look forward to the combine. Then after that, it's the draft. And then there's sort of these benchmarks in the offseason to roll it out a week later and just say, here you go. Here's some inferior football. I hope you guys like it, and we're going to put on 4 games for you. I just don't know whose idea that was or who thought that was going to work.
I'll say this. You're talking about over 100 years worth of building and growing. And there have been times where they've had, other competitors pop up and try to do it. No one has been able to create what the NFL has been able to create and build what the NFL has been able to build. And I don't see, where we're at right now, just the product that is, again, we have gotten so trained on two things. One, how the NFL makes you feel, because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not really into watching regular season NFL games either.
Oh, come on, how could you?
I'm not. I watch them because I have to. I'm not really into them. I'm more into college football. I watch college football, and I get that same feeling when I'm watching a first game of college football that I get when I'm watching the playoffs of NFL football, because the stakes are high. When I watch, I watch the XFL games, it just doesn't give you that sense of, well, it's the NFL, and I know they're good, and I know the names, and really, honestly, if it's not a game where I want to turn the broadcast off, I actually watch the games for the production. I enjoy the production of the games. And so for me, I just think that unless they were able to come up with something, I'll say this, they would need a very, very long time to be able to train a community, build and organically grow a community, because that's what the NFL did. That's what college football has done. In order to compete against institutions, it would take you a lot of time, a lot of money to be able to be even in the same conversation as this is comparable, or this I'd rather watch this and watch the NFL. It's just they're too far away from that.
I was talking with some people from my wife's family over the weekend. They were asking, what's this XFL thing? Because they weren't really familiar with it. They're like, where would you tier it if you were to talk about football? And I was like, well, it's never going to be the NFL. And it's got no shot of ever being college football, because college football's already got the built-in rivalries, the pageantry, all that stuff, and we love college football. And then I'm thinking,
No.
Man, in certain parts of the country, it's
High
never going to be high school football.
Nope.
So,
Talk about Texas and Florida and California. Like, nope.
So we're talking about like a fourth-tier football product that they rolled out the week after the NFL season. Like, it just didn't make sense. The USFL launching in April makes a little more sense. At least you got some time. You know, you get away from the NFL and all.
It's going to be the same thing.
I get it, but to go side by side like this and just to do it, or not side by side, but right on the heels of the NFL season, I think that's an error in judgment on whoever put that together.
I think you tried to give Q a layup here with the CFL. But go ahead.
No. I'm going a different direction.
USFL.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm going a different direction because I think the problem is the XFL and the USFL, both are trying to be something that they'll never be. They can never create the history, tradition, the rivalries, any of it. They can't create what already exists.
Correct. They
should have originally looked at the model for NFL Europe and understood what that was, which was a developmental league.
Yeah, I could dig.
They weren't trying to get TV ratings. They weren't trying to worry quite as much about how much money they could make from it. It was an opportunity to develop all involved. It was an opportunity to develop players. It was an opportunity to develop the coaches. It was an opportunity to develop even the broadcasters, the cameramen, the analysts, the play-by-play, everyone behind the scenes. And finally, and probably most importantly, it was a way of being able to spread their footprint subtly and being able to build up football over in Europe, which I truly feel like has led to the attraction of the London games and games in Germany and people's fascination with football as we know it. So I sit back and look at it and say, sometimes you can't always look at it as a bottom line item on your balance sheet. Sometimes you have to look at it and say, what are we trying to accomplish with these leagues? And the problem is, none of this is really a byproduct of the NFL because none of these leagues are partnered with the NFL. The XFL and USFL are their own entities. So that's the problem is back in the day when you had NFL Europe, those were like little mini minor league franchises, if you will. So now you look at it and you just say, all right, like what's the point? Are we really trying to fill a niche of football that's not there? I mean, wasn't Mark Cuban that said it at one point? Like, the pig's going to get too fat. You can't keep pushing to have football year round. This is the time of year where you turn your attention to the combine, which is coming up next week, or the draft, or all these other things.
Or your family you've neglected for the last 6 months.
Yeah, and then sometimes guys will retire. They'll do that, and they'll actually come out of retirement. That's happened before.
It's like, wait a second.
Happened last offseason.
Wait a second. So I got to do your breakfast and
I've
take you to school?
This. Yeah.
Hold on a second.
I mean, that's real. I mean, we saw that happen with one individual.
Yeah.
So I just think if you look at the XFL and USFL, and it's not a great business model, but that's the reality of it, is the NFL Europe was successful, whether or not anyone wants to admit it, at least in the sense of accomplishing goals that I think the NFL had. And as we look at, minority coaches, for example, how do you get them more opportunities to become a play caller on either side of the football? You have a league where you get to play, 10, 12 games where they're over there as a head coach or as a coordinator, and they're doing it. And it builds up that equity, I think, with not only NFL owners but everyone else, where they've got something additional on their resume. Like that's what I think this should be about, even though it's not. It's not about any of that.
I don't even think it's about that. I mean, I don't even think that it has that type of impact, to be honest. I really don't. And, it would be nice if it were. I also think that it would be nice to understand that some of the stories are pretty extraordinary. And I think that that's another thing that would beg to be mentioned, is that the fact that the NFL is covered the way that it's covered. The biggest story in media for the last couple of days has been what? LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah.
We're not even in season. And the biggest story in sports has been dominated by NFL headlines. When we say that the NFL is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, longest running reality TV show. That's not tongue-in-cheek. That's not joking around and being sarcastic. That's exactly what it is. It's so dope of a reality show that most channels are able, especially sport channels, are able to grow their brand off of telling the stories, reporting, covering, and being related to that show.
Dude, Dak Prescott's contract extension got us through COVID.
How about it?
Like
How about it?
Like, that's the NFL. World shut down. What are you guys going to talk about?
Ezekiel Elliott wanting his contract got us to the season.
Well, and I was going to say the Jordan documentary, but
Yeah, The Last Dance.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
I get it. And I think that's a cool documentary, and it came at a perfect time, but nothing is touching the amount of coverage and the amount of fanfare and the amount of buy-in that NFL football has. And I think a very close second is college. It's a very close second. And in some people's book, I mean, people like college. And so to me, even if you were trying to angle the National Football League, I would, if I'm an XFL, I'm saying, hell, I'm going to try to figure out college. I'm going to try to compete with college because college is way more fragmented because there's way more teams. There's way more interest in many more places. I wouldn't even compare or say or bring up this is pro compared to NFL. This is like you said, Q, and a variation of these guys are getting paid, they're older. This is like college. And I'm going to try to I'm going to try to fight against college. I ain't going to try to fight against the machine. The machine is the machine.
You know what the problem with that is up until a couple of years ago, you could have had something to entice players.
There you go.
But you don't have that anymore.
Not anymore.
Not with NIL.
Nope.
And so now there's really no advantage into even trying to compete with college football because of what they're able to provide and pay student athletes. So even that's gone by the wayside where it feels like it's an uphill battle for all these leagues.
and also, I think you kind of lose people when you don't give a team name the Hawks. They're the Battle Hawks, or the Dragons. They're the Sea Dragons. You're just adding corny on top of corny.
I mean, I ain't gonna lie,
What's
bro.
a sea dragon?
I have no idea.
A mermaid. I immediately was like, they're mermaids. Like, they're mermaids.
Yeah.
I mean, I started thinking of Little
Great
Mermaid.
point.